And I'm Jake Latondres. How are you
All day
doing,
long.
Stephen?
Really good, really good. It's been really pretty weather down here. Unseasonably cool. You don't get to say that in June very often.
Imagine that. Yeah, you said you were wearing a jacket all day yesterday. That's pretty wild.
Yeah, and most of the day today, when we woke up this morning, it was 58 degrees, and that's unheard of. Not just low temperatures, but no humidity. I told Kendra yesterday. I said, I'm glad we don't have this weather all the time. And she said, why? I said, we'd never get rid of the Yankees.
That's funny. Well, it's been unseasonably hot here, to be honest with you. I just got back from your neck of the woods. I was down in on Lake Eufaula in South Alabama, straight across the state from you, and it was definitely hot there. That's for sure.
Well, it was warm when you were there, but it just really cooled off for the beginning of this week. It'll don't worry, it'll warm up by the weekend.
Yeah, I'm sure it will. So we there's people that are starting to populate. We got 10 people on here right now. I finally got 4 bars up on our video platform here, so hopefully we'll be good to go. They're all green. So we're going to change up a little bit. Steve and I were talking about doing a question and answer session at the beginning of the show from now on, so that we could address questions and get to those right off the bat before we start the practical video experience. How's it going, Boone Cook? Good evening. And so do you have questions? How do you want to do this, Stephen? Should we get the people that are on here to type up the questions, or should we address some of the questions we've gotten in private messages?
Well, I would love to reward the people that want to step up and ask. It's like you put earlier today, like you posted, the big thing, one of the things we're encouraging is let's try to stay on task as what we've talked about so far, whether it be swim by or down the shore concepts. I think that we've answered a bunch of questions, but one of the things I was really pushing for everyone to do was to go back and review the videos, go back and look at it again, because you'll think, hey man, I got a question about this. Well, I did address it, but you didn't hear it because you weren't ready to hear it, because your level of knowledge wasn't there yet. And now you've caught up and you're a lot farther along, and you got questions. Well, guess what? I probably addressed a lot of them in those previous episodes. So if you've gone back and you've watched all the videos and you have specific questions to swim by and down the shore concepts, I kind of wanted to open it up and let some folks ask if they had any residual questions, because that's the like I said, as you continue to progress, other questions pop up. So if there's anybody that had anything that wanted to jump off on this thing and kind of help wrap up this point of emphasis that we've been on for a month, feel free to ask them. That being said, another reason why I can't say it loud enough that I stuck by this and said, let's keep on plugging on this, was one, I was seeing Jake's continual improvement. And two, I cannot emphasize enough how important it is to pick something, stick with it, and don't stop until it's a solid concept, till it's really there, not just something that the dog happened to do right once or twice. So Jake is nowhere ready to leave down the shore concepts. However, he needs to move towards doing some other things for the sake of balance, and the fact that Tanner was bored out of his mind. So, I mean, he really was. I mean, he was over it. You could see it in his body language and his temperament. You could tell that Tanner was ready to move to something different. So he does need to see other things. He does need to be challenged in other ways. That being said, he is not perfected down the shore concepts yet, especially when extra factors are involved. You get a little bit of excitement in there, and all of a sudden, Tanner's water commitment is not nearly as strong as it was, when it's a factorless, clear picture down the shore bind. All right.
What?
Go ahead.
Just going to say, So what goes through, is it from a dog's perspective, what's going through his head? He's disinterested because there's complications and he doesn't want to do it, or what causes that?
One more second and the phone will quit ringing. Of course, Kendra walked out the house to take the baby to the grandparents, and then the phone started ringing. So say that last thing one more time.
Well, you were saying he's disinterested when there's other factors involved, and like what? Explain that. Why is he disinterested when there's more factors involved?
Well, I wasn't saying that he was disinterested. I was saying he was disinterested for the fact that you were doing nothing but running down the shore blinds. And the last analysis we did, we were talking about how he was being a turd, looking away, running down to the edge of the water and not jumping in. All those things were based around boredom. That's what I meant about him becoming disinterested. The point that I was making it that when you got to the more interesting looks, where the shoreline wasn't straight, when there was trees on the side, when there were places that ducks could be hiding, that was when he all of a sudden decided that the shoreline looked a lot more inviting than when it was just a plain vanilla down the shore blind.
Gotcha. So Josh M has a question. During the chat, you had alluded to some tune-up drills. I think you were thinking water tee casting drills in the water, that you do get the dog casting good away from the shore. But then you mentioned that was an entirely different discussion. So my question is, what drills do you do with the dog to get them confidently casting away from the shore towards the water, and how often do you revisit that drill?
That is a really good question that you're going to see a version of tonight by accident, actually, believe it or not. And I want Jake to kind of to describe it in his way, and then let me describe it the right way. But the down the shore discussion, when I was talking about, you don't need to be giving a dog a cast toward the bank with a verbal unless you can get a silent angle cast toward the water. So the drills that we use are typically called tune-up drills. That is one of the primary factors. But essentially what we do is a series of drills that are always from less water to more water. So they turn into kind of like pattern blinds, but it's more of some of the very first basic drills that we run with dogs are blinds that are always increasing water every time. So the shortest swim in the blind drill is always the first swim, and every swim after that is longer, and it's usually to maximum water. So the basics that you get out of that is you begin casting toward more water on every line. After they've run the first blind, they want to run back to the first, and you're casting away towards the second. After they've done the second, they want to go to the second, and you're casting away towards the third. And each time, it's always toward water, because the dog's saying less water. I want to go to where I've been before. And we're saying, no, take more water. Choose more water and you will be rewarded. So what happens when after revisiting those drills over a series of days, typically Rex Carr said if you do a tune-up drill to do it no less than 5 times, over a series of days, you'll all of a sudden notice that the dog, instead of trying to run 1, when you try to run 1, it'll be trying to run 2. When you try to run 2, it'll be trying to run 3. It's actually getting watery. It's beginning to want to be in the water to a greater degree. And all of a sudden, where you were giving cast towards more water in the beginning, the dog will be wanting to go out there on its own. And that's how we start shaping these concepts. And the drill, if you look at the mechanics of the drill, you'd be saying, well, the dog is being continually taught to take lines towards more water. But more importantly, the dog's mind is being placed. As they mature in this drill, they'll start seeking more water on their own. So to sketch it out.
So can I say this, that, during these drills we're about to watch, I did one where I was slicing the corner of the pond off to sort of challenge myself and him more. And while the first time he wanted to run the shore, the second and third time it was very easy to get him in the water, and it was very easy to get him to engage in swim by on his way back. Is that what you're talking about?
Well, he was familiar with the concept that you were doing for a multitude of reasons. So his familiarity with the concept would definitely make him more likely to take your cast, carry your cast, and be more compliant therewith in the following compliance aspects. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this would be an example of one of the tune-up drills that we do. So if I can zoom out enough, you think that's a body of water and I'm running off of a point, and we're pretty much swimming straight across on one, and then each blind is progressively towards more water, and number 5 being the corner of the pond. So initially, when you run one, when you first start this drill, you'll run one and then try to run 2, and they'll want to run to 1 because they want to perpetuate where they've been before. And then you try to run 2, or you try to run 3, and they're going back to 2. You try to run 4, and they're going back to 1, 2, or 3. They're going towards less water. When they get really good at this drill, you'll see them when you try to run this blind, they're actually coming over here. You try to run this one, they're coming over here. And before you know it, they would rather run this blind, which is to the most water, than they would run this blind, which is the least. A dog's natural instinct is to take as little water as possible. When you see them wanting to go to the corner rather than take the short swim, their mind is out here. Their mind is in the middle of the pond. You could run this same drill this way. See if I can get that over a little bit.
The other way?
Yeah, you could run the same drill this way. Guess what? We do. But the point to be made is that you're always doing your shortest swim to your longest swim. And it's a mechanical thing at the beginning, but what it turns into at the end is the dog's mind is end up bent toward water, and they start seeking water rather than looking for the short swim. And when you get to that, but when you're in that situation, that's where you want to be. That's when the dog's actually ready to start making decisions toward less water, but staying in. I hope that helps a little bit with your question, Josh.
Yeah. To me, for sure, your drawing helps a lot, and I'm anxious to get to that point because I've got a really good spot for that.
Super.
Yeah, really good.
Super.
Does that how far is that swim that you drew? Like the first one, the first blind.
Bear in mind now, this is an example of the first water blinds we do with dogs. So the first swim is probably 45 to 50 yards at the most.
Perfect.
The last swim's probably between 80 and 100.
Perfect.
At the most.
I've got that exact scenario on one of my ponds.
Well, super. But that, like I said, I do all these to give you an idea. Let's just, to lay it all out there on the table. This is a little bit busier, but not a lot busier than what really happens. So to hold that back up again.
You're fuzzy on mine. Oh, I can see it now. Yeah.
All right. So you got all those different spots, and this would be 2 halves,
Looks like you're fan casting for bass.
Doesn't it? But these are two different drills. You got a left side and a right side. So when they perfect one side, then we start on the other side and do that until they perfect it. So, but the point to be made here is, guess where my first down the shore blind that I ever run normally is?
First down the shore. Yeah, I was going to. Oh, okay.
Right down where they've gotten out all those times, because they'll be swimming down the edge. Normally what I'll do is I'll throw this as a single one day and let them swim down and pick up the single. And then I'll come back and run a blind in a couple of days down the shore. And not only is the shore inviting because it's the shore and they haven't been schooled on down the shore blinds, but they'll start swimming and go, hey, I know that place. I've been there 25 times. I know this place. I've been there 20. And they'll just keep swimming down and going, can I get out here? Can I get out here? Can I get out here? And I'm saying, no, over, tweet, back, and going through the process of schooling that concept.
That is really, really interesting.
So
can definitely see it. So somebody asked, Gloria asked, do you mix up the order of blinds after the first time?
No, absolutely not.
That's what I was going to guess.
That's a great question. So you always go from shortest swim to longest swim. And it is not a bad thing if you start out and run 1 and then the dog comes out and jumps and goes to 3. You don't have to pick up 2. You can skip to 3 and then skip to 5. I mean, I'm not saying I'm not saying intentionally skip, but if all of a sudden a dog makes a big decision toward more water, you don't have to tell it less too quickly. I can tell you all about the mechanics of how we run this blind drill, but the truth is there's so many nuances, so many tweaks we do based off of what the dog does. So it's definitely a fluid process, but I don't like to reverse. I don't like to run to less water at this point in time. I want to make sure that the dog is continually seeking more water on each successive blind.
Makes sense. We got some good questions coming in now. Andrew May asks, how do you discern between a dog being bored versus not having repeated the drill or been trained in basics enough to not run crookedly or pop, etc., that we're observing Jake?
Well, one answer to that is you got to ask yourself, how many times have you done the drill? I mean, you can keep a logbook and know, and the other thing you got to remember with watching Jake do this stuff is that Jake was not teaching Tanner how to do down the shore water blinds. Tanner has been schooled in down the shore water blinds. He's been schooled a lot in down the shore water blinds. So he was going. It wasn't just that Tanner was bored with the process and he had only done it 5 times. Tanner was bored with the process because he felt like, one, he knew what he was doing more than Jake. I mean, in all honesty, he felt like he knew more than Jake did, and was feeling out getting away with that. And 2, he was just out of balance in how many down the shore blinds they had run in the past month. So all Tanner's seen, and this is partly on me and partly on Jake, the lion's share of what Tanner has seen when it comes to work has been swim by, which to dogs could be no more litigious than swim by, because I've got the reward, and now you're telling me to take an over to water for what reason other than the fact that you just said so. That's a very litigious aspect to a dog. So he's been schooled on swim by too much, and then he's been drilled in the head with down the shore water blinds. He's just tired of it and was ready to do something different. Do you disagree with anything I'm saying, Jake?
No, not at all, for sure.
What's your opinion on parallel shifting your lines from channel blind concepts towards shore blinds?
Same with opinion on parallel shifting your line. What does that mean? Lines from channel blind concepts towards shore blinds.
I'm thinking he's talking about moving his line that he's actually running from. I can answer your question as far as, especially early on in my training, I didn't have traditional channels. Matter of fact, on this farm, I still don't have very good traditional channels on most of my properties. So a channel blind, Jake, is where you've got a long, thin channel and you're expecting the dog to take the middle of that channel and carry it out. So what I had to rationalize was that a channel blind is a double down the shore blind. Does that make sense?
A channel blind is a double down the shore blind.
Correct. Think about it.
Yeah, I'm trying to analyze that. So a channel blind is a double down the shore blind. I'm not getting that.
You've got a down the shore blind on the left and a down the shore
Uh,
blind on the right.
okay. Okay.
You follow what I'm saying?
Yeah, he's parting the Red Sea.
Well, and that's the only way that I knew how to deal with it, was that since I didn't have traditional channels, I took extra time schooling on down the shore concepts and made sure that I did it correctly on both sides. And if I did 10 times down the shore concepts on the left, I needed to do 10 times down the shore concepts on the right. Make sense?
Yep, totally makes sense.
So that was how I compensated for not having a true channel. So parallel shifting, I'm assuming, William, that that's what you were asking. You can clarify if you want to, but I'm thinking that's what you're saying. And when we're talking about angle entries, angle exits, I address that a lot on tune-up drills as well, because as you're seeing the different gradients of taking water and the bigger, longer swims, the farther out you put your piles, the more you have to hold a angle exit as well. Dogs like to square into the water. Same reason they want to square into everything else. They want to face it head on. And it's especially difficult when a dog's coming out of the water and 2 feet are touching the bottom and 2 feet are not. And that really pulls them out of the water again. And they've got to hold their that angle exit. That's a advanced concept that dogs have a big tendency to deal with.
Gotcha. Hey, I'm going to let you answer. Do you correct Josh's next question? I gotta run back here and turn this battery charger off before they overheat. I'm going to let you. Do you correct the line, the dog only by handling through attrition, or increased corrections by e-collar? I'll be right back.
On initial tune-up drills, we do not use the e-collar in this drill. That, especially with basic dogs at the very beginning, we try to stay away from collar corrections as much as possible when we're schooling this basic drill. Only when we're polishing the concepts do we add any kind of collar pressure at all. And then even then it would be indirect pressure. It would be on sit, Nick, sit, or here, Nick, here. It would not be on taking the wrong cast. So less collar is definitely more when it comes to basic tune-up drills. And like I said, we have lost our host. He had batteries from his super high dollar cameras that he had charging, and I'm sure he just didn't want to melt down those good things. The long story short on Josh's answer, Jake, was that especially when we're teaching these basic drills, less collar is definitely more. We use very little collar pressure on these drills initially, lots of attrition. So sitting the dog continually, not letting him make progress if they're not doing what we ask them to do.
It's funny. I find myself, not knowing what I was doing, I was probably a pressure guy. If I can admit that.
Sure.
And I have found myself, since we started doing these homework lessons, I find myself using the collar less and less, probably 90% less than I used to.
And don't take this the wrong way, because I'm glad to see you shifting to that direction, because that is showing that you're more obligated to teaching than the old burn them till you learn them concept. However, with Tanner, you're going to get the point very soon that you're going to have to quit giving freebies, because he's going to operate within that system very, very well. And he knows the system. He knows I'm getting a freebie every first mistake I make, which makes him not feel accountable to avoid the first mistake. Mm-hmm. Your dog's more advanced. Your dog's older. He's more schooled, and he's more hard-headed. All those things together are going to mean Jake's going to have to be a little bit more affirmative with the collar, but I can always take somebody that's less and make them more much easier than I can take somebody that's too much and make them less. The too much to less people are the ones that scare me. because they let temper interfere, they let problems interfere. You know,
They bring bad habits to the table that are hard to break.
yeah, and they got to be able to leave those habits even when I'm there and when I'm not. You know, they got to trust the system. So
When I'm hiring new bartenders at my bar, one of my I guess concepts of wisdom is when I'm hiring it, people come in and give me this big long list, resume list of all the bars they've worked in. I tend to shy away from them because I know they've built bad habits over time, and it's hard to break them of those bad habits when they get into my bar. And I want them to work under my system and not someone else's system. And then, it just turns into a clash.
exactly, and when they know more than you do, it's never going to work. I mean,
Correct.
and I say that facetiously. If they're not willing to learn that there's more than one way to skin a cat, then you're never going to be able to have a productive employee out of them, I believe.
Right.
Boone says, do you feel dogs learn from running down the shore pattern blinds? In other words, does it apply to new places, aka cold blinds? I think it helps. I think it allows dogs to gain confidence, especially young dogs. But in the long run, you've got to jump to different pieces of water, because if you got a perfectly square pond, you got 4 down the shore blinds, and you can only run them so many times before you got to go somewhere and do something else. So it does help with confidence. It does help with schooling the concept, but like I said, you can't run pattern blinds forever on down the shore blinds.
I want to back up 1 second to the question before that, because you were talking about hoping that I will not let Tanner get away with those things that he's getting away with, especially early on in a drill. And one of the things I noticed, and in one of the the videos that we'll show, is he always I go back to something you said before in one of the earlier lessons, which was if you give him 5 steps, he learned that he knows he can get away with those 5 steps every time. And that's what that sucker's doing to me now. So as I chop away at this 1 step at a time, I see what he's doing early on. And when I give him, like, if I'm trying to get him in the water, I give him an over, and he takes 5 steps and then turns around, he's already turning around before I blow the whistle. So I know he's not counting his steps, but he knows how far he can go before I stop him. And he's turning around looking at me before I even blow the whistle.
Exactly.
He's a range finder.
Exactly. Well, I mean, he's understanding how much play there is in the system, and he's capitalizing on every bit of it. That's the point that I'm making. William Harrell said, would never let the dog get a bumper to the right in your tune-up drill by running the bank correct.
Never let the dog get a bumper to the right in your tune-up drill.
I mean, the answer to that is if they're not in the water, they're not doing right here. So, I mean, no, it's hard for me to know what left and right is to y'all because these cameras are backwards, and I feel like I'm doing stuff left-handed and I'm a right-handed person. But the answer to this is they should be going from less water swims to more water swims. And in this case, in this particular tune-up drills, the only short swim is straight across. So I'm guessing. See, there I go. I feel like I'm this right. Could a dog come around here and get it? I mean, that's not even in the realm of possibility or thought. That's one of the great things about running from this point is it takes those concepts away. Now, if I ran a drill similar to this from right here and ran, let's say, starting at number 3 and progressed this way, it would be a whole nother story about them wanting to cheat. But that's not exactly what I was running. However, I wonder if Jake just said if he was standing right here and ran this drill, it might look a lot like something maybe Jake ran earlier this week.
Yeah, it looks just like it.
So,
In fact, you drew what I did.
so that wasn't intentional, but that shows how you can just change your line and things are a whole lot different. So,
Mhm.
I'm just checking the scrolling line to see if there's anything else. Is there a benefit to continue to increase the distance before entering the water? Absolutely. Distance erodes control. Distance will continue to challenge the dog to make a water decision when land is more evident. Backing up is one of the simple ways to complicate this drill. So I can run this same drill from 10 yards away instead of standing on the edge, and it was a whole different concept. So, yes, there's benefit.
I feel like, when I send Tanner, now that I have, now that I understand, backing off the shoreline before I line Tanner up. One of the things that I notice is I have more time. I have more time to stop him before he makes a bad entry than I did when it was too short, because he took 2 steps and he was in the water.
I'm not trying to cut you off, Jay, but I think I just figured out William Harrell's question. Hold on one second. I accidentally scrolled up. Said, so blind 3 couldn't be picked up from spot 2. One thing I want to make very clear in this, and this shows how people cannot be certain on things. I am running from this point. I am not running from here or here or here. My arrows are pointing the way the dog's swimming toward the bumper. So I hope that maybe clears up. But this is again, Jake, why this is, I want to get an interactive ability to draw on screen so people can see. Understand, I'm running from the point out across the water, not from the straight dam toward the tip of the point. So I hope that clears up a little bit. So back to what you were saying again, Jake. I apologize.
No, that's okay. So blind 3 couldn't be picked up from spot number 2. Oh, yeah. So that's what made you clear that up, right? You were addressing that part of the question?
Correct. Yes, sir.
Are there any circumstances where you would use the Dobbs method of making the bank hot, nick, or return, or getting out early?
That's again that.
What's the Dobbs method?
So what he's saying right there is if the dog chooses to run the bank and is running around rather than activating swim by, the Dobbs method in this case is that you just continue to nick, even if the dog runs all the way around, and then you rerun the concept and the dog doesn't want to get out and stay off the edge. They don't want to get out and run the edge again because of the nicks. Are you following me there?
Yep.
So I'm not going to tell you I never do that, but that is the whole point of why I stress swim by as much as I do, because I think that swim by and making a dog jump back in the water and swim farther is a much more solid way of correcting this. When you're nicking, the next step for a very smart dog is, okay, then I'm going to put my feet on the bottom and stay in the water and then just run around on the bottom and still be in the water. And then what do you do? So, and you're not addressing that mindset of bending their mind to more water when they say less water. So I would really, really, really encourage you to go back and watch that swim by conversation again and understand the mindset behind it. The reason we're doing swim by is we're bending that land dominant mind out to water indefinitely, rather than just shaping a behavior by running around the edge. And the other thing there is I think you're teaching them to stay off the bank for all the wrong reasons, rather than respecting it and saying, I understand that there's a right way to do this. You're just making the bank uncomfortable. And I'll go ahead and tell you, Tanner would be more than happy to take a nick all the way around the pond and look at you and smile when he gets there and say, I will do it again, because it doesn't hurt my feelings enough to make me change my behavior.
So basically, a nick all the way down the shore is a long. I mean, ultimately, you might as well be burning him all the way down, right? It's
Correct.
uncomfortable. So you're telling him, do not ever run this bank again.
Well, yeah, but again, what you're getting there is a dog that's just, you might be teaching them to stay off the bank, but they don't know why, and they don't know the opposite concept. They don't understand, if I take more water, that makes me more safe. And I think you're getting into the wrong dynamic of training, whether it be, you're getting into resentful activity with punishment behind it, rather than positive punishment. And that if you say less water, I'm just going to make you swim farther, and that's the end of it. You're avoiding collar corrections on the bank altogether, unless it's in a much more black and white format, where you're telling them to no, get in the water, and they are blatantly refusing and then being corrected, as opposed to a dog that's just running around and trying to get to you as fast as they can, and they feel like they're walking through a briar patch the whole way there.
Right. Yeah. I definitely understand that. It doesn't make as much sense for sure. How far are the blinds apart in your tune-up drill?
Usually 15 to 20 big steps. And again, it depends on how far the distance is. But in these basic drills, it's usually, on this specific drill, I think it's 16 of my steps, if that. And that's not little baby steps.
I got a question for you. It's very simple and basic, but I don't know the answer to it. So I'm using orange bumpers on these blinds. They've all got black ropes, and most of my working area, my training area, is short grass. So it's hard to hide them. And I think sometimes when he goes after, let's say he goes after one, he picks up the first blind, he looks over and he sees the black rope on the number 2 blind. He already knows where it is. Does that matter?
If that happens, I'm saying good dog. It does matter, but it not necessarily matter for the wrong thing. I mean, it's setting them up to do the right decision. The other thing you got to remember is some dogs see orange better than others. So he may actually be picking out the color. The other thing you can do there, I think you're using 3-inch bumpers.
No, on these I've got more 2-inch.
Okay, so that was my point, is that you can make them a little bit smaller if you're using a 2-inch. The other thing you can do, if you really want to be tricky, is you take the black rope and you pull it against the bumper and then lay the rope down under the bumper. That also helps it if you think that's keying on them.
Well, the problem is that I'm trained by myself 95% of the time. So I'm putting the blinds out, and I've got Tanner out running around. I'm trying to distract him like I'm hiding Easter eggs from him. So I walk by and just drop it down by my foot, and then I walk another 20 yards, drop another one. You know what I'm saying? So it's not as cut and dry for me to plant those blinds like I should. Maybe I should just start going out there with my truck, even if it is only a half a block away, keeping him in the box while I plant the blinds and set everything up and then get him out.
That's possible. It's not to me, honestly, it's not the worst thing in the world if they do see you set them out. Set them out in reverse order, the last one they pick up should be the last one you put down. So the point to be made is that if you set your number 1 out, the number 1 blind out first, you will have walked away from that blind a significant amount of distance. And if you really want to be tricky, walk the rest of the way around the pond instead of just turning around and backtracking. And that way it won't be as recognizable to them.
Okay, that's what I have to do on this pond anyway, is walk all the way around it. Got it.
Field Dog Life says, we have been getting this commentary a lot lately. The behavior isn't corrected after the e-collar. What should I do? Well, you should check to see first, have you schooled the dog to understand how to modify its behavior when it feels pressure? If you haven't collar conditioned the dog appropriately to modify its behavior when it feels pressure, that's on you. If you have schooled enough and you know that you have done the work, that the dog should be able to modify its behavior when it feels pressure, then the pressure that you're applying is either ill-timed or not enough. So you got to check your timing mechanism and make sure you're doing it in a way the dog understands. And if all that applies, then you need to turn up your pressure so that you get compliance. So the way that I help explain this to new clients is that the punishment should match the crime. If the dog is doing a minor infraction and you give it a major correction, that is not fair. But if it's doing an infraction and you are applying pressure and you're getting no difference in response, and you're doing the application of pressure appropriately, then that just means you're not giving enough pressure. So let the punishment match the crime. And that being said, the more excited a dog gets, the more prey drive aspects get involved, then the more pressure it's going to take to get the same response. That when that adrenaline level gets up, that whole concept of feeling no pain is very, 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 very real at that point.
On your tune-up drill drawing, if you're running number 5 and you give an inside cast, the dog swims down the bank in the water, should you let him go to a different one, such as 7 or 8?
Well, in this case, that's not possible because 5 would be the corner of the pond. I just ran out of paper there. But if I was running blind 3, and when he says inside cast, that means towards less water, and the dog turns and takes more water. If I cast like that on blind 3 and they swim to blind 5, more good on them. I'm not gonna.
You said that early. You said that early on when you first introduced that drawing. If they're going, they should, when they start to understand the concept, they should be going towards number 3. If you send them up to the number 2 blind, and so on and so forth. And if he decides, you address that right off the bat. If he's going to number 5 when you send him to number 2, then that's a good dog.
Yeah, so yeah, you're starting to understand my concepts that I'm looking for here. So more water's always better. Cotton top retrievers, Mr. Jimmy Pierce. I don't want to discriminate. It's usually a young dog owner training on their own, puzzled why the behavior isn't corrected after repeated use of the e-collar. So again, I would point out there that with all those extra things being in there, young dog owner, training on their own, you need to find somebody that knows what they're talking about, and seeing is believing, because most likely right here what this is a inadequate amount of conditioning taking place. Again, it's not a dog doing the right behavior when they feel when they do something right one time. It's them doing the right behavior over, and it's called conditioning for a reason, over and over and over. And you don't condition for a marathon by running 1 mile one day. You have to, it's the same concept. You have to do this kind of work over and over. If you're bored, then that means you're starting to do it right. If you are bored and you feel like this is a drag, and I wish I was doing something else, but my gosh, the dog is actually listening. And when I tell it to sit, it's sitting. And when it feels pressure, it's changing its behavior. And your dog looks like a hyena walking around because his hiney's 3/4 of the way to the ground. And sit is the answer to everything. I want to go outside, sit. I want to come in, sit. I want you to throw the bumper, sit. I would like to go do anything, so I'm going to sit and wait for you to release me. Then you're just starting to get sit really right. I always ask this question, and I've yet to hear somebody give me anything less than a truthful answer, and it be other than this. Have you ever seen a dog sit too good?
You asked me that very early on.
Exactly. And my point there is that this is the command that they're going to rotate around for the rest of their life. And we don't, I haven't yet seen a dog sit too good. Not for the right.
You see him sit too bad. You see him sit bad all the time.
Or not sit.
Yeah, or not sit. So that would be another thing, like at the line, like in an advanced level. I've been to 2 hunt tests in my life, never been to a field trial. I've been going to SRS crowns for 12 or 15 years. I understand it better than I did, last year. But one of the questions I've always wondered is, when your dog comes back to the line, let's say you're running a triple and he picks the first one up, he comes back and he's lined up on the second one, but he's not sitting. You send him. Some people send him. Some people make their dog sit. What's the difference? What does it matter?
The difference is the standard that you hold and what you feel like is best for this dog. I like for dogs to sit down. A lot of times I will relax that the older a dog gets. Why would I do that? Because sometimes the older the dog gets, the harder it is for them to sit down. They got a little arthritis back there. If there's a reason for them to not sit down, then I'm not going to pick that fight. Especially, let's say that if you're standing in, ankle deep water, a lot of dogs hate sitting in that anyway. And to pick that fight would be more detrimental than actually going forward with it. This could also apply if you've got just a really, really muddy spot. A lot of times dogs will fight that fight there. But I like for dogs to sit down because that's the way that I always train them to leave in training. Some people don't put as big an emphasis on it, and that's their prerogative. But I just feel like if you play like you practice, you got a much better chance of playing well. So I'm a sit guy unless extenuating circumstances dictate otherwise, and that could be weather conditions, that could be the medium in which we're working, or it could be the age of the dog. And I just know it's better for them to not have to sit because of, it hurts their back or whatever.
We're gonna have to have a show about line etiquette because this just keeps leading into more questions, and we're getting away from what we wanted to do today in this casting drill.
Well,
so
I wouldn't say that like I said, the casting drill is secondary, Jake, and I can't say this enough. I had someone else ask me today, what are you going to do with Jake next? And the answer was what Jake needs to do. And that's on you. That's, it's good for me to help direct you, but you're the one that knows, what your questions are, what your inadequacies are, or your lack of understanding. You're the one that knows that more than me. I can point it out when I see you act it out, but just sitting here and staring at your face, you got to give me something to go off of. So if we don't make it to casting, but we talk about what answers your questions, that's great.
Okay.
That's part of it.
So when the dog returns from blind number 1, do you take the bird? Some people take the bird when the dog approaches, and some people wait, turn the dog, sit the dog down, take the bird, then realign them on the next blind or the mark or whatever it is. When do you take? What's the right etiquette? When do you take the bird from the dog?
So if I'm running a multiple and I send the dog on a mark and they pick the mark up, I usually align my body so that when the dog heels to me and I take the bird, they are looking at the next mark that I want them to pick up. So I want them to come in to heel, give me the bird, and I'm going to already have them rough set up. I'm going to have my body pointed toward, and if they heel correctly to me, then their body will be pointed toward the next bird to pick up. And that way it's just streamlined and as simple as possible. I was listening to Mike Gibson's Behind the Line podcast for the SRS today, and that was one of the points that he made. He said, the novice watching has no idea how many subtle communications are going on at the line between the handler and the dog, and that every little movement does have a meaning. And I had one of my clients that was very, very involved when Dude was here. She pointed out that when we were running, it almost looked like poetry in motion. She said it looks like a dance. It's so elegant. He comes in and does his thing. You have him set up. You take the bird out, and he takes that baby hop and locks, and then you send him again. And there was a very, very fluid motion to how we ran. And I knew if I took the bird out of Dude's mouth and he didn't take a half step forward, then he didn't know where the mark was. But if I took the bird out of his mouth and he took a half step forward, get out of his way, he was that good at marking. So that was knowing the dog and knowing I'm not going to fight with him about sit the way I'm going to fight with another dog, because when he takes that baby step forward, most of the time he's sitting. But if he's just crouched up a little bit, I'm not going to risk breaking his concentration over 2 inches on a sit.
Mm-hmm. Reminds me of how Scottie Pippen and Michael Jordan worked together.
Yes, very much so. They each
knew each other
because of the other one.
Mm-hmm. And they never stopped. It was constantly. It was pass, dribble, dunk, pass. I mean, it was just the same thing back and forth all the time. So, yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
I don't understand Bennett's question.
Can you break down? I think what he's saying is, can you define young dog? 6 months to 18 months is a young dog. What's the middle age? What's old? Like, how do you break that down in age class?
Well, I'm probably not the right one to ask in that, because I talk about young dogs when they're running the grand. For me, anything before maturity, so I typically calling young dogs when they're 3, usually something before 4 years old to me is a young dog, because they're just putting things together. You've got dogs that are in basics, you have dogs that are in transition, and then once they complete transition, if there is such a thing, they're still in that young juvenile. They're coming into maturity. A lot of dogs say a dog's mature at 2 years old. Well, yeah, they might be physically mature at 2 years old, but you still got a lot of time to find out, what they are going to be. I always get on to folks and say it's not what they are when they're 2, it's what they are when they're 4, 5, 6. That's when they really come into their own, and you're dealing with a mature dog. So anything for me as a young dog that has not matured, and I am continually in a race against time to try to get that dog as influenced as I possibly can before it matures, because once it does, it's like, trying to get me and you to break old habits. We're instilled in them, we're ingrained, and that is a much more difficult thing. That whole thing about not teaching an old dog new tricks, that's not true, but it takes a lot longer. And the more you can teach a dog before they mature, the better chance you got at getting them thinking the same way you do.
I asked that exact question to my veterinarian friend Jonathan Bradshaw there in Little Rock, and from a veterinary standpoint, anatomical and physiologically speaking, he broke it down, 7 weeks to 6 months, 6 months to 18 months, possibly, maybe more like 12 months, and then 12 months to 3.5, and then 4 to 7, and then 8 to 10, and then whatever's after 10 is extra. That's elderly.
And
does that sound about right?
Sure. But when you sit there, the point to be made there, as far as a dog trainer goes, when you talk about the amount of maturing that happens, the amount of learning that happens between 6 and 12 months, if you were to say a 6-month-old and a 12-month-old are physiologically very similar, I'd have a big problem with that, because of how much, again, vets are looking at the physical side of it, and we're looking, as trainers, as not just physical maturity, but mental maturity. And how many kids go to college as mature adults? They're adults. They can vote, and in a very short amount of time, they can drink. But that still doesn't mean that their mind. They say, well, your mind doesn't mature until you're like mid-20s or something like that. So we I
was going to say about 38.
In that case, I'll get there next year. The point to be made there is that, just because a dog's physically there doesn't mean they're not still learning the ropes, that you're not still polishing the diamond, and you got a lot more. I had a trainer years ago tell me that once the dog makes it to 2 years old, they've learned 90% of everything they were going to learn in their whole life. And I took great issue with that. I said, you got it all wrong, man. I said, by the time they're 2 years old, they've just learned the basics well enough to start learning the fun stuff, to really start moving to the next level and challenging them appropriately. So I think a 2-year-old is very juvenile in most respects. And
You look at deer. A 2-year-old deer is still a kid, a teenager. A 3-year-old deer is post college graduate, and the 4-year-old is when they start to get mature, but they really don't hit their prime until they're 5, 6, 7, and 8. And that's when they've got the big jelly belly. They're much smarter. They're way more nocturnal, and they're much harder and difficult to see because they're just that much more mature. And I've always heard from my, pro dog trainer friends over the years that 4 years old is like, it's not, no one's setting standards at 4 years old because people are trying to get dogs further along a lot quicker nowadays. But I'd always heard that a 4-year-old dog on average is going to take you 4 years to get your dog to a high level of competency. Is that something you can live with, or would you debate that in general?
I don't think I would fight with that too much. As far as, can you get dogs to perform at high standards before? Yes. Can you get every dog to? Not even close. And just because they do it once doesn't mean that that's ingrained to be there forever. So let me ask you a question, and this is truly a question. The oldest deer, the oldest in the wild, how long does the oldest buck get? I know they're going downhill, but
they get to 12. That's pretty. That's extra borrowed time. 9 or 10 years old is even really old, but 8-year-old bucks start to get kicked out of their home range by younger 5-year-olds, and then they start becoming more nomadic again. And if you kill a big buck or an old buck at 9 or 10, usually he's going downhill, and it's pretty rare.
So how old is an old dog?
I mean, I would say if you're asking in years, I would say probably 10. Starting to get old. Some not. Some.
Sure, they're old at 10, and some not as much. And they live a pretty catered to life with a steady diet, where there's no such thing as drought. There's disease is controlled every year by going to the vet. So some dogs live a lot longer. But if you were to leave a dog to its natural devices, I would say that the lifespan of a normal dog and the lifespan of a normal deer probably would be very similar. So I, never having talked about this before, I think that wouldn't be the worst comparison in the world when you talk about when you watch a buck physically age and when it reaches its prime and when it's great. I don't think that it would be a far-fetched concept to compare that to a dog and how it matures and ages. When you're talking about, they are very different animals, but they share very similar timelines in their life. So,
I've always felt that way, even in their mentality. Now that I'm learning about dogs, it makes a whole lot more sense to me when I compare them to deer, because I understand whitetails and how they act in their different age classes. And there's definitely a correlation there that helps me understand where a dog might be. Like Tanner's 3 now. Okay, well he's post adolescence, but he's still. He can still get hit by a car really easily because he still doesn't get that. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. But even so, Tanner would be the buck that tried to whip up on the 5-year-old, and thought that he could have every doe out there too. Tanner would walk out there with his chest out, ready for a fight, and he would get his behind handed to him and sent back. And truth be told, probably Tanner wouldn't stand a good hiney kicking or two from something that was bigger than him. Would probably help him in life.
Probably true, yeah.
But you can understand what I'm saying. I mean, how neat is that we've managed to draw a parallel there, talking about how a buck's physical manifestation is evident from 5 to 8, from 4 to 8, and dogs, I feel like, have a very similar timeline. when it comes to, we're talking about mental maturity more than physical maturity, but we're not asking deer to run 500-yard blinds either. So that's pretty neat. Miss Shannon said, if the dog comes back to you, this is when we're talking about picking up a multiple again, and wants to pick up, comes back to you and lines up with the bird you want to pick up, and then looks at a different one, do you let him go for that bird? And yes or no, and if not, why? That is a definite maybe question, Miss Shannon. There are times that I would like to pick a fight, and there are times that I would just let the dog do what it does best. If it comes back and looks at a different mark, first question you got to ask yourself is, did it see the bird that I'm trying to get it to go after? Because if I wasn't paying attention and I don't know that the dog didn't see the mark fall, then I'm in a problematic situation there because I didn't pay attention as the handler. If the dog feels more comfortable going to get another bird, and I feel like letting it have its way is going to set it up for better success in the long run, let it go. If I feel like them going and getting the mark that I want them to get sets them up for better long-term success, and I feel like I have a communication level that I can get that compliance. That second part is every bit as important as the first. Have I done this enough? Have I practiced this enough to demand the dog go where I ask it to go? Then I can pick that battle and try to get him to go where I feel like is more beneficial. Because a lot of times if I'm trying to get a dog to pick up a crucial bird, I'm trying to get it to picked up in that order because them picking it up in that specific order sets them up for success. For instance, if the bird that they want to go get is at 200 yards and the mark that I want them to get is at 25, and they go get the 200-yard bird and come back, the likelihood of them stopping at 25 yards on the next send is not very good. We get wrapped up in dogs running a long way, and wow, this dog can run a really long bird. But what you really learn in the long run is that getting a dog to stop short after they've been long is very, very, very difficult.
That's really interesting.
The other thing to be said there is, are you at a test or are you in training? If I'm in training, I'm going to ask them to go get the bird I want them to get every time because I am practicing to have that level of control in a test. So in training, I'm going to ask them to go get the bird that I want them to get every time. In a test, I'm going to have to make a judgment call based on, is this dog in a mindset that I can influence in a different way? Or is the dog schooled on this enough? And are they compliant enough? So you got to ask a lot of questions in order to answer those. And I'm pretty sure Miss Shannon was asking about in a test. But that being said, in training, you want to always try to get them to work your way.
The three things I thought of out of that question was, at least with my dog, is one, if I let Tanner do that, then I just let him make his own decisions, which he's bad about doing anyway. So I'm not going to let him do that. Number two, in a test, if you have to pick up the birds in order, then you can't do that, right? And number three, in a hunting scenario, which I'm most likely to be in more than any of these, is that I may have to send him after a cripple or one that's floating downstream with the current, and I've got three other birds on land, and I got to get him to that one first. So I need him to do what I'm asking him to do.
Very well put. Very, very, very well put. That's, yes, absolutely. I agree with everything you're saying there. I've watched the SRS series a lot.
Well, how many times have you watched it?
She's throwing darts at me is what she's doing.
And she's an editor. That's an editor's comment.
Oh, wow. And
Give me a ha, Shannon.
That concludes our podcast tonight.
Yeah. Thank you all very much. Have a great night.
Good stuff. Really good stuff. Again,
that's pretty funny.
You got to pay attention to your dog. You got to know what they know, and you got to act accordingly. Stay tuned to the SRS, and you'll see what we're talking about. Cool deal. All are you ready to talk a little bit about casting, Jake?
Yeah. So do you want to do, what do you think in the, let me see.
Don't
We've got,
be around, Jake.
we've been on.
We got some talking to do first.
Yeah.
So don't
Okay, let's
see any
talk.
videos. So I'm so glad that you've been filming these Bassmaster events, because I use this analogy a lot. And again, I'm really, really big on the why behind things. So I'm going to start telling you my theory on casting and the why behind it first. I believe that two things are necessary in order for a dog to be able to take a cast. They have to be able to comprehend the cast, and they have to be able to comply with the cast. Those two things are not mutually inclusive. So comprehension comes with a couple of different things. First and foremost, amateurs, have you schooled enough to ask for this cast, whatever cast that is? Have you done enough tune-up drills to know that the dog can cast toward water? Have you done enough down the shore concepts to know that you can give a verbal cast toward the bank and expect them to stay in? Have you schooled the dog on the concept? The other part of comprehension comes into being able to be seen. Are you wearing super duper camo in a hunting situation? Are you wearing black against a dark backdrop? Can the dog physically see the cast that you are giving in order to be able to comprehend what you're asking for? Are you wearing a white jacket standing against the skyline where you look like another cloud? Can the dog see it? And does the dog know how to comply with the cast based off the training that it's been given? That's a lot. That's a lot that goes into the comprehension aspect of it. But before we get back to comprehension, I want to get into compliance. So you have to give a dog a cast that it can comply with. Do you got any idea in the world what that would mean, Jake?
That it understands the cast that I'm giving it, so that it knows how to react when I give the cast.
That would go into
compliance.
Exactly. So
do what I ask you to do.
So when it comes into to comprehension and compliance, that would go back again into have you schooled on it enough? But when I say give a dog a cast that it can comply with, I'm not talking about the schooling aspect at all. I'm talking about how the dog perceives you through its eyes. All right. So down deep, even though these are domestic animals, way down there, there's a wild animal at heart, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how does, if this dog was in its natural habitat, is it a predator? Is it a predator animal, or is it a prey animal?
Predator.
Okay. So how do predators identify prey?
Running away.
Keep thinking. Keep thinking. Let me put this in a way you should understand. When you're bass fishing, what do you try to make the lure look like?
Oh, an injured animal.
An injured animal. How would you do that?
Twitch, twitch, jerk, jerk. Erratic movement.
Exactly.
Aha, aha,
exactly.
aha,
now
aha.
You're getting somewhere. So predators identify weakness. Yeah, now you're getting somewhere. Predators identify weakness through body language, and especially movement. So if your movement looks like prey, i.e., if you're a lion on the Serengeti, you're going to pick out what looks old, tired, injured, weak, young. And all those things are indicated by the way that they move, the presence that they have when they move, that you can tell if something's wrong or not. So if you look like you are uncertain of what you're doing, if you look like you're insecure about the cast that you're giving, if your movement looks rapid and erratic and uncertain, a dog is genetically programmed to not comply with that cast. So
Totally understand that, because that's what I get all the time.
now, and going back and analyzing, a lot of your casts are better than most. But this is the one thing that, another thing I preach in my seminars is that once I tell you this, you can no longer claim ignorance. You cannot say that you don't understand what's going on here, because when you see the person that's up there and they blow the whistle and they're panicking and they look like they're having a seizure. The dog's looking at them like, people, you don't know what you're talking about, and they brush them off and they take off like they don't know what they're talking about, and they just brush them off and go on about their business. And we say, oh, that was a cast refusal. And I go, I would say that was just a really weak cast that the dog was not able to comply with because it wasn't given in a manner that the dog could respect. Mm-hmm. So go ahead.
I was going to say Tanner, because of where his level of understanding is, he steadied me up, because I found that when I stop him, I have to be already ready, because if I'm not ready, if I stop him and then I get set, then he's already moving. He's like whatever side I move dominantly, then that's the way he turns, right? And so I found myself, understanding the fact that I have to be set before I stop him, so that I don't have any movement before my cast, because he reacts to every little movement that I make.
And we talked about this at one point, and you can actually start getting away with a little bit of extra movement if you know how to nail it down. But I wasn't ready to talk about that, and you weren't ready to hear it. So that's why, we actually talked about this. I don't remember if it was on a podcast or something before that, but I was like, you are pre-casting your dog. Your hands were down, you blow the whistle, you pick your hands up. And when you picked your hands up, he said, see ya, I'm gone. So you've got to make yourself look like you, and you also, I don't know if you remember, we talked about this. I said, I would rather you give an affirmative cast and make a mistake than to give the right cast in a hesitant manner. This goes back again. I'd rather you look like you know what you're talking about and be talking crazy talk, but look like you know what you're talking about, than be telling the truth or telling an accurate depiction and look like you're uncertain about what you're saying. So dogs are masters at reading body language. They understand that when, every move you make has a consequence. Excuse me. And you've got to be as clear and concise with this animal as you possibly can. So my method behind casting is I want to make sure that I give a cast in an affirmative manner. And I want to make sure that I maximize my ability to be seen. That's why Miss Sue said, are you 5'2"?
I thought she was asking me. I'm like, hell no, I'm 5'8".
the reason
my dog's just tall. If you're measuring me by how my dog, I got a tall dog, Susan.
The reason she's saying that is because it's a running joke about maximizing your ability to be seen, making yourself as big as you need to be. Another part of my casting is predicated upon maximizing visibility. This goes in again to comprehension. Can the dog see the cast that you're given? So if you're casting with your hand flat and open all the way to the top, and you pretend like there's a glass pane in front of your body, and you're putting your hand on the glass and you are rubbing the glass, like the whole mime in the streets, right? There's a glass pane and they can't. Exactly. That is maximizing your ability to be seen. Everybody has a tendency when they get to the top of their cast to pull their hand back, or to cup their thumb over their hand, or to twist. See here, I'm going out of the picture. Let's see which way we can go here. when they give it over,
I see what you're saying.
their hand
You're gonna hold
like
a sign up
instead of being open.
Yeah.
For me,
Yeah.
typically, hand open is going to be something in an angle back cast. If my thumb is down, it's I'm giving a straight over, because it's hard to give an over with your thumb down. Like, try to give an over with your thumb down. It's pointing.
Yeah.
It a lot of times people have a tendency to hold on one second. Okay. A lot of people have a tendency to give an over, and it's an angle. They'll say, let's see if I catch this hand. They go over. Well, your hand's way off to the side at an angle rather than being parallel. If you put your thumb down, it's hard to go above 90 degrees. The other thing that my dogs pick up on is that especially in the summertime, that and that are two very different colors. So when they see brown, that means over. When they see white, that means back. And they start figuring that out, those color cues out. So pretend like there's a glass pane in front of you. Put your hand on the glass and then follow your fingertips. If you want to give it straight up, give straight up. If you want to give an angle, follow your fingertips, and don't twist your hand. And don't twist your hand.
That helps so much. Because when I give
go ahead,
an angle back, I'm always like wondering, and I watch myself in videos and answer my own questions, and I'm always wondering if that should be, where should that be? And let me ask you this: so you've got two overs, you've got two backs, and then do you have two more angle backs or just one more angle back?
That's a great question. So the way to determine what cast to give, if it was a human and you were directing a human, you would point right to where you want them to go.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna say, I want you to go that way. If you would point, just make that in a two-dimensional plane, and that is your cast. So you say, hey man, I want you to go straight back. That's your cast. Mm-hmm. If you want them to go over here, it's you literally point at where you want them to go in a two-dimensional plane. So there is not just a 45 or two 45s. Every cast in the whole spectrum, every cast means something, and you are literally casting them to where you want them to go. Now, there are times that you give less cast and more cast. When you're training, we've talked about getting more out of less when you're casting toward water and less out of more. If you're casting toward the bank and you're having to give more angle than is necessary to get them to get close to the bank, that shows that the dog is giving you effort, that they're not just trying to bail towards the bank. So there's a lot of nuances in this concept, but we're going to talk about just a dog in a blank slate, in a blank field cast. You point, you want them to develop the mindset that if they take any cast they are given and they hold it to infinity, they're going to find the point. So you literally point in a two-dimensional plane to where you want them to go. So flat surfaces. For me, I cast with, if I'm casting with my left hand, I'm going to put it straight in front of me and have my other hand underneath. When I do this, it cuts their world in half. Wade, do you want to say hey?
What's up, Wade?
Hey, world.
What's up? What's up, buddy?
Hey, give him knuckles. There you go. Hey, what don't you do?
But you gotta come here.
Listen to me.
I will. I promise.
Tell mommy, daddy needs some ice water, please. Thank you.
I'll make it.
So. All right, y'all go. Thank you. So two-dimensional plane. When I cast with my left hand, I show them my left hand. That cuts their world in half, and they understand that they're going to be rotating right. Remember that they're facing you. Therefore, when you cast with your left hand, they're going to be rotating over their right shoulder. When I show them my right hand, they're going to be rotating left. So understand. Wait, I'm not going to ask you again. Thank you. So understand, when you show that hand,
Hurry.
you're cutting their world in half, and you're going, hey, little man,
Walker wanted to say hi too.
my little mean one that down here needs a play friend. You need to come control him. So whatever hand I show the dog, I don't show both. I show the one that I'm going to cast with, and that helps set them up for, some people would call that a precast. I'm just saying I am interpreting which rotation that I want them to take. And remember, way back when we talked about how dogs think in rotation. So when I show them my right hand, they're thinking about rotating left. And then I'm going to maximize my visibility. I usually try to keep my hands close together instead of spreading my fingers. I try to keep my hand flat. You can see how that light changes even there. You see how my hand shines, and I turn it.
You bet.
Shadow that falls over it. Just that. Think about what a difference that makes at 100 yards, 200 yards. So
completely understand that concept. You know, one of the ladies, or one of the most intriguing casts or precasts that I recall, particularly at the SRS events, was Miss Dorothy. How she would
He had a very elegant way about casting.
But her dog, it gave her dog time to understand what she was about to do. Is that not right? Is that a precast?
Had a very good communication level and understood exactly, the dog understood what it was being asked to do, and she had it, and she didn't do that for fun or for kicks. She did it every time.
Consistency.
And exactly right. She was super consistent with it. So you would gain a greater appreciation for what she was doing if you go back and watch those videos now.
Yeah, for sure.
So compliance and comprehension. Did the dogs see your cast? One thing that I would like to point out: give a straight up cast. I want you to give a straight up cast. All right, now point your fingers back behind your head like you're holding do you feel all that burn, that pulling, tendons pulling, muscles pulling? Now point your hands straight again. Do you feel anything?
Straight?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah, I see what you're saying.
If you
like
are
this versus that.
Exactly. If you feel tendons pulling, if you feel like you're really doing something, you're taking away from your dog's ability to see you. If you cast,
so it needs to be straight up, not back, because again, you've got a flat surface. You're going to see the whole surface if it's flat, two-dimensional.
Correct.
And if you three-dimensionalize it, then you're going to see less.
Correct.
That's more. That's more. That's less. That's less.
Yeah.
That's
don't forget about the Hail Hitler. Everybody has a tendency to want to drive their dog, so they step towards them and say back, and they push forward. What they really do is take away from their ability to be seen, because this might not make a difference when the dog's at 10 yards, but when the dog's at 180 and you're casting like this, you're actually making yourself shorter. You're making yourself less visible. So the more two-dimensional you can stay, the better off you are. When I say take a step, it's never taking a step forward when you're casting. It's taking a step sideways, making yourself bigger again on a two-dimensional plane, not just stepping forward. The only time I'm usually stepping forward is either one, I'm chasing a young dog that I don't want distance to be too great every time they turn around. I don't want them to feel like I'm as far away as I could be, or the dog is directly beside me, giving me issues about going, and I'm stepping forward and saying here and giving a nick to say that forward motion, release pressure, pup. But when it comes to casting, you got to bear in mind the importance of comprehension and compliance. Comprehension goes into the schooling aspect that we have talked about for 4 episodes now. We picked a single cast, and over 3 different episodes. For 3 episodes, we talked about one specific cast and how to get it. Think about how much I apply that on a regular basis to dogs that I'm schooling on this. If you think we drilled it into the 2-legged listeners, think about how much the 4-legged listeners get schooled on this concept. So, and it also goes into physical ability to be seen. If you're not being seen because of what you're wearing or how you're casting, i.e., turning your hands, a dog cannot take a cast it cannot see. And it cannot take a cast that it cannot comply with. And that goes into the concept of, are you casting in a way that looks like you know what you're doing? Are you giving affirmative casts that reiterate to the dog that you are helping them get to a destination, rather than giving them a cast that looks like you don't know which way's up, down, left, or right?
And I was going to say that one of my really bad habits that I have to break, and I do it every time, is I take a step forward on a back cast. Back, straight back, left to right, or angle back, left to right. I always take a step back. I don't know why I do. It's a 40-year-old habit that I have to break.
Well, the initial reason why you did it was because you were trying to get the dog to go.
Mm-hmm.
And it turned into a habitual response. The same thing. I'm a big deal on, I don't like, you heard me say, don't karate chop your dog. I don't like to bounce my hand when the dog leaves. I want the dog to run out from under my hand instead of me doing this to him to make him blink. So
That's another question too, because, I watched everybody at the Peppers Pond SRS event. I watched them send their dog. Some people have their hand down for an extended period of time, and some people drop their hand, and some people bounce their hand. And I'm like, okay, well, which one of these is right? And I suppose there's no real right answer to that, but which one is better? Which one, I mean, answer, where I'm going.
It depends.
Answer the question that I'm trying to ask, Stephen.
Some people don't even know that they drop their hand. Sometimes people don't put their hand in at all. And this is going to be something way down the road when you're talking about check down concepts. You don't put your hand down because you're designating a line on a check down bird. If they've run 200 yards and you come back and you want them to run 25, if you drop your hand down on that line that the 25-yard bird is on, you drop your hand down and show them that line, they're already thinking about running 200 yards. They may run 200 yards right on line, step on that bird, keep on going because they were exhaling instead of inhaling and just overran the bird. So there's times to not put your hand in. There are other stylistic differences. So there are other stylistic differences there that, some people just bounce their hand in. Some people, usually when you see people taking longer to put their hand in, they're really emphasizing a long bird. They're really trying to get the dog to mark that or to see that memory bird well and to really understand the line that they're wanting to take. So you can see people be methodical based on, based on that is their style, or that is a very long, crucial bird, and they're trying to either get them to look at that long mark and really hone in on it, or it's a short bird and the dog's really thinking about running long and they're trying to talk it off of that cliff of momentum. Easy, check down. I don't want you to go very far. So I'm a big advocate of putting their hand in and holding it there for a second, because I believe that time period from when your hand stops moving till when you send that dog is when it will tell you everything about what it's thinking. The way its eyes moves. If you put your hand down and it looks hard right, it's telling you it wants to go right. And you need to either take time and reevaluate the situation or move up and clarify the situation. But they will tell you everything that they're thinking. And that pause between when your hand stops moving and they expect you to say their name. If you put your hand down and their eyes never waver, their nose never flares, you can rest assured that dog knows exactly where it's going. And 9 times out of 10, it's going to go exactly where it's looking.
So the analogy that I'm cueing in on here is I'm a bow hunter. Okay. So, and I use sights. So when I line my bow up, okay, when you're young, you're all over the place. And then you try to time it to when you're on the bullseye, when you pull the trigger and release your arrow. As you get older, you try to hold it still and when you are steady, you pull the trigger. Now, a lot of pro shooters target shooters will tell you to line your side up, your pin up, and drop it down, or line it below and bring it up, and then align it when you pull the trigger when you get to your bullseye. So, correlating that to sending a dog, I noticed, when I first really started understanding any of these concepts, even at an elementary level, which I'm still at, I noticed Tanner swinging his head. And I'm thinking, okay, what am I doing wrong here? But then once he stopped swinging his head, his eyes are swinging.
Mm-hmm.
So am I sitting there waiting for him to have his eyes on the target, or am I waiting for him to lock in on something? Because if it's a blind, he didn't know where to lock in. How do I get him to lock in on the exact direction that I want him to go?
Great question. Yes, ma'am. So the answer is, it is not. This isn't. Okay. Don't take this out.
You're not trying to get lucky. You're trying to be precise, right?
Well, I always tell folks, this is not like shooting a bow. This is like guiding a missile. And what I mean by that is that you don't want to try to be too precise, especially with a young dog. You don't want to be too precise too soon. So it gets better over time. But like you said, when that head's swinging, we're going to address that with sit, because sit means sit down and look straight out. So, and then when you get the head still, then the eyes are moving. As they get more confident in you and more confident in themselves, their eyes won't move as much. But you focus on sit, and you don't try to be overly perfect. Like you said, at the young shooter is continually, trying to be perfect. The older you get, the more you have accepted the fact that you're not going to be perfect the entire time, but you can be perfect right for that instant, and train for that instant that you can let the arrow go. And I guess that is a good way to think about it, is that instant that we're talking about will get longer and longer over time. That moment of clarity, and you got to know what it is for the dog. I would rather a dog leave 2 degrees off, 5 degrees off, 10 degrees off. Let's get really aggressive. 15 degrees offline, having a destination picked out, than a dog just leaving. Even if it's the wrong destination, at least they're having enough self-belief to pick something out and run at it, rather than just leaving out because they heard back. Does that make sense?
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, they're leaving with a purpose, opposed to just aimlessly going somewhere without any target in mind.
That's exactly right. So even if that's not the perfect destination, they're getting enough confidence to pick something out. And if they'll pick something out, then I can start honing in. Okay, that's not exactly the right something. Pick something else. All right.
It's always trash.
Yeah, exactly. A white trash bag.
Big cup. Yeah.
So if they're picking anything out, that's better than just staring at the horizon aimlessly. And you will see, as the dog matures, they'll get more confident in picking things out. The more blinds they've run, the more experiences they have, the more comfortable they'll get at picking different destinations out.
I would tell you that the highest when I'm running a blind or whatever I'm doing, the most anxiety that I feel is at the line, lining my dog up. Like I can feel it in my head, in my body. I can feel like I start cussing inside. I get that is the most frustrating thing for me, is lining my dog up properly.
Well, and I think, and if you can feel that, guess who else can?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So
Tanner.
So the point to be made there is that you have to be flexible enough there to not care as much. The less emphasis and focus you put on this, the less big you make it, the more achievable the goal is. So when you're doing a lining drill, that's the time to really emphasize lining. When you're learning how to run cold blinds, that's not the initial line is a great thing, but the initial line is going to get better over time with perfect practice. But you got to learn how to hold on loosely. Is that a good way to say it? Instead of trying to be up there and be perfect from the start, here, get the rough alignment right, which is from the base of their tail to the back of their head. Get that rough alignment right. Sit. And when you give that good hard sit, you're going to have a moment where he'll look out and go, oh. And then you'll see him, oh, I'm starting to look everywhere else, and then sit, and you'll see him come back. And
see, that is so important, Stephen, that you just said that, because when I say sit, I'm mad because he's not sitting. But you're saying sit to cue him. So when I say sit demonstratively, that is freaking lining him up. That is really, really important that you just said that to me. Hope that helped everyone else.
I've said it to you a dozen times before, but it finally clicked on you. I mean, and that's the truth. Sit does not just mean sit down. Sit means look down and look straight out.
Mm-hmm.
So, but the same thing. Remember, we did the analogy where I said, well, we're not doing this looking at the camera. Sit means align everything out and look straight out. And it doesn't just mean sit because you're in trouble. It means not just sit, but look straight out. So go back tomorrow, tell Tanner to sit, and when he starts kind of wandering around, say sit, give him a nick with the collar, and say sit again, and watch what happens. He will immediately look straight ahead, not forever. He'll look straight ahead, lock on for a short amount of time, and then he'll start swinging his head again. Sit doesn't just mean sit down. It means sit down and look straight out. And if you look straight out and I have you lined up appropriately, shazam, go.
So dogs have ADD all the time, and you've only got X amount of time between when he is locked in and when he starts his ADD.
He's not going to stare forever. And,
right.
And when you get that half-second pause and you put your hand in and you send, and that doesn't mean remember, it's on your mark, get set, go. It's not on your mark, get set, go. You can't rush it that much. You have to keep your cadence there. On your mark, get set, go. And when you get to that level, then you can start saying on your mark, get set, go. You can start allowing that time frame to get longer and longer. One thing that you can do to practice your hand coming in.
Why would you do that?
Because you're increasing the dog's concentration time. They're getting better at it, and that allows you to also allow more communication aspects to come in. Good job, right there. Those other reaffirming words if you want to use those.
I hear that all the time.
Where I really like to work on a dog's concept of me putting my hand in and saying that is correct is on a mark where they saw it fall, they know where they're looking, and I will really work on putting my hand in and really them accepting my hand being in. That being said, I'm not putting it in right in their face. I'm not trying to block their field of vision. I want
you're basically
above their exactly. Yeah. Not down in there.
You can tell, right? So it's basically right over their eyebrows,
and they can kind of see your,
because they have their eyes are set as a predator.
Correct.
Their eyes are set so they can see in many different angles.
Correct. So you're not trying to block their vision. You're not trying to touch the tip of their nose. You're just letting your hand be there to say that's correct. So you can really practice them accepting your hand being in on marks because they know where they're looking. They're focused on that, and they get used to that hand coming in and saying, oh, that's right. I'm getting to go now. So you can really practice that on your marks and let that translate over to your blind running as well.
Roger that. I'm really glad we had this conversation because I've been wanting to have this for a while. And it cleans a lot of things up for me that I just didn't understand, had no clue, totally clueless, but, trying to figure it out on my own, thinking, okay, well, I can tell kind of what he's thinking here. But then, the next day it's this. And I'm like thinking, am I causing him to head swing? What am I doing to cause so much head swinging? And then you come back the next day and the first blind we set up, he's locked in. And it's like, how come I'm not? What do I got to do to get consistency here? Yes, redundancy.
And I think a lot of that with him, that we identified the other day was avoidance based around not confusion, but just sheer boredom. And, he was wanting to do something different. So he was being a turd about it. I mean, really, I think that was just his way of dealing with things. So
he's like going, Jesus Christ, how many times do we have to do this, dude?
Yep, exactly. Exactly.
That makes me laugh so much.
But it's like I said, these conversations are what lead to clarity on your end, and you're getting so much more out of this understanding. So, I think a lot of the times that he's getting head swinging all over the place is when you are trying to be too perfect for too long, and he's just saying that's enough's enough, and I'm just not gonna focus at all because I don't know. I've looked at every point on this whole place, and I hadn't been told it was right yet, so I'm not going to look at anything. So
that makes a ton of sense.
So when he looked,
and that is right. I mean, I not knowing what I'm talking about, I totally agree with that because I felt like that's why I would just reset. I would say, okay, here, back up or take a step back. Let him relax for a second and then come back and reset. That's why I was doing that because I felt like this is taking way too long and I don't know why, but this ain't working.
You'll see other dogs that get nervous about it. He's not nervous, but you'll see other dogs that get nervous and then they'll just start looking at their toes because they're scared to look out. Another thing that can contribute to this is, you've heard me say this in the past, I don't like using negative words when I'm running blinds. I don't like saying no over and over and over again because it makes dogs feel like they can't look out. I'm a big here, heel, sit guy. Everything, if I want you to come to me, it's here. If I want you to look away from me, it's heel. If I want you to look straight out, it's sit. That's what I am focusing on. Here, heel, sit. I'm not using the word. We'll talk about when I use no later. You're going to hear these. You'll hear me talk about when to use no far down the road. But I don't like using no when I am lining dogs up. It's a very extreme circumstance, like with Tanner in the trash bag. That would have been a no situation. But if a dog's just not looking perfect, I'm not going to sit there and tell it no. I'm going to say, here, sit. Here.
Yeah, you can't go, no, yes.
Exactly. This
ain't duck, goose.
This is sit.
I mean, sometimes
sit,
it's duck, goose.
And when you pick out what I want you to look at, I'm going to put my hand in and tell it to and say that's correct. Sit is not a reset. Sit is sit down and look straight out. That is all it is. It is sit means the same thing by your side as it's meant the whole time. It's just I am teaching you, Bennett, how dogs understand what sit means. Sit means sit down and look straight ahead, period. End of story.
Dude, the fundamentals just keep coming back. And like when we have a conversation like this and it goes back to these super basic fundamentals, I feel like I need a cigarette. And I don't smoke.
If you remember, I talked about when you correct a dog with a collar on sit, it incites fight or flight. And if they're going to do either one of those things, they're going to square up. They're going to get their body totally in line to either fight or fly. That's a natural instinct. You're going to get yourself set up toward it. So you give that little tiny nick on the collar and they go, what was that? And then they look straight ahead because they're like, I don't know why I'm doing it, but I'm doing it. And you use that moment to get them going.
It's like attention.
Exactly. 100%. Mr. Andy said, so when you prepare to cast, I only show one hand rather than two. Two hands would
You're just simplifying it.
Two hands would be increasing visibility. However, two hands still has the dog guessing which one am I going to move, as opposed to if I'm showing like this and the dog's, and I'm always framing in front of my chest. always. I'm not up here. I'm not down here. I'm not bringing it from my back pocket. Every time I cast, I'm casting from in front of my chest so that, and see, I'm not casting like this. I'm not casting like this. I'm casting like this. See how my hand shines just in lamplight, how my hand will pop.
Sure.
So I cast from the same place every time so that the dog always knows where to look. When they spin around and they see my hat and my shoulders, they know to look dead center of my chest to look for my hand. And that goes back to consistency every time. So two hands are more visible. However, two hands in this manner does not give a dog an inclination of which way they're going to turn. So that's a stylistic thing. I wouldn't tell you that what you were doing is wrong, Mr. Andy. I'm just telling you why I do what I do. There's probably plenty of people sitting out there going, this dude's crazy. Everything he's talking about is not how dogs interpret things. And that's all well and good. You know, you don't have to get on board with this level of thought. I'm just telling you, nobody taught me how to do this other than the dogs. And the reasoning behind what I'm explaining to you is based around experience and what I've seen dogs do over the past 15 years. So everything I'm telling you I'm doing is based around what I've seen in dog behavior and how I have analyzed what they're seeing and how I believe they see what we're doing. And I think the more that we can look like we know what we're doing through our body language, and the more we can look like predators and not like prey animals, the more a dog is going to be genetically inclined to listen to our body motion. Our actual physical movements are going to tell the dog a lot about who we are. And then they're going to be able to say, okay, these casts that we're being schooled on, I can listen to that cast because it's being given in a calm and affirmative manner. So for me, when I cast, I show them my hand, I pause, and I cast the direction I'm going. I don't get fast. I don't get in a hurry. This is in there's an old saying in dog training that with a slow dog, you cast fast, and with a fast dog, you cast slow. That doesn't necessarily indicate a dog's physical rate of speed. You're talking about a dog's mindset as much as you are physically. With a young dog, you might catch me casting fast with a young dog that lacks confidence because I'm just trying to get them to react and go somewhere. But with all my older dogs, you're going to see me cast in a slow, calm, assertive manner because I'm trying to slow not just their body down, but their mind down. And you remember how we talked about if you cast fast, you're trying to get the dog to see all your casts. But what you're really doing there is making the dog spin faster, and they're seeing this much of your cast and they're gone. Whereas when you slow down your cast, it makes them watch the whole thing before they leave. Sweet. Wendy.
Yeah, I got a Freddy's shake.
Is Freddy's the same as Wendy's?
No, it's a little bit different, but kinda. Yep. It's kind of like Burger King and Wendy's hooked up and made Freddy's.
Got it. T-Max says, how do you get them to pick the right thing out if the spine is lined up for the blind, but the eyes are on another target? Again, I'm focusing on sit there. And if what they're looking at is 5 degrees off of perfection, I'm not going to make a big deal about that at the beginning. They're going to get better with age. They're going to get better with reps. And I would rather miss by 5 degrees than spend an extra minute trying to get that 5 degrees right and lose the dog's attention span.
So what about when you feel like, you know, you're 5 degrees off, but you send your dog anyway for that reason that you just explained, and then the dog takes a 30 and heads out, you know, on a completely different angle, like what in the hell just happened?
If it's a training scenario, I'm going to stop the dog, bring it back, and start over because 30's in the ditch, right? 30's not starting off anywhere online. So move up, simplify, clarify, whatever I need to do, but 30's not acceptable.
Okay. Are there any other questions? We've burned up almost 2 hours.
I told you we weren't going to get through this tonight.
And I'm so glad you can have some water. I'm so glad because this is the conversation that I've been looking forward to. Hi, Tanner. And uh, I got a ton out of this, and we didn't even look at a video. I didn't get to show everyone how terrible I was doing.
We're definitely going to hit on that, and I want to, but like I said, I figured that once we got into the hows and the whys behind this, that we would not get into too much video watching tonight. What I'm dying to know is Miss Carol said the best tip ever. I would love to know exactly what tip that was.
I think it was the glass, the hand on the glass.
Maybe she'll jump in here and tell us if she hadn't already gone to bed. I know I'm not long for this world, but you know, the thing to remember here, and like I said, bass fishing analogy is as good as any. You got to remember, if you look like prey to a predator, that's something that you need to, that's something that they're going to exploit. That they're genetically programmed to exploit weakness. And I think
if you're not doing that, you're not catching fish. If you're not mimicking an injured bait fish or food source, you're going to catch less fish because you're teaching them, you're making them react to something that's naturally that's in their DNA.
Yeah, exactly. So especially when you're talking about jig fishing, fish that are tight-lipped and they're not feeding based off of a need to eat, you're actually getting in there and actually just you're bothering to the point that they don't even realize they're doing it. They're just reacting and attacking that thing. It's the exact same thing when you give a poor cast the wrong way. A dog's going, I can't listen to this. It is not possible for me to listen to this cast. It is not given in a manner that I can listen to.
Mm-hmm. The fan casting thing too, the analogy of fan casting, say you come up to a point where you're fishing off of a point or the front of your boat and you're fishing an area, say a grassy area, fan casting, you're precise so you cover it all. And I think the thing that you were doing with the what is that drill called again?
Tune-up drill.
Tune-up drill. So the tune-up drill was fan casting to me, and you're teaching, you're getting different angles, and you're getting different your variance in distances as well, and you're covering a lot more.
Correct. The difference being when you're fan casting and fishing, you may be going from right to left, or you might be doing like a windshield wiper pattern. But what we're doing on this tune-up drill is we're taking, in this case, the shortest swim was straight across, and we're going from the middle out. So you're gridding it like you're talking about. It's just a little bit different approach, but having a way that you can relate this stuff makes a big difference, and that's just in anybody's field. Your strength. I'm trying to put these things in ways that will click with you because I know your background. Whereas, with somebody else, if their strength is in another area, I try to set it up for them in that way as well.
Sure.
So go ahead.
So Miss Cassidy confirmed that the best tip ever was to touch the glass.
Yeah.
That is
And I remember when she came down and trained, I remember now that she was breaking her wrist, like she was saying, she wasn't keeping her arm flat. And I remember now exactly the conversation where we were when we had it. So that's good stuff. Super deal.
Well,
let's note. I want you to get a couple more. I really want you to get you another couple of examples. We'll talk about this a little bit more, but we're also getting to the point in this that I know you got a busy life, but you're going to have to do a little bit more in the field work consistently. So we've got more, not just so we've got more to talk about, Jake, so that you have a clear direction of where your strengths and weaknesses are so that we can keep heading in those directions. Like I said, I know you've had a very busy hard time with this whole COVID deal and trying to get your bar back up and running, but you can't neglect that dog, or I'll come back and repossess him and sell him to somebody else. We'll do the Retriever Connection 2.0.
Say, no way, Jose. My buddy. All right. Well, thank you guys. We had a great crowd and lots of great questions occurred, and we really appreciate it. That's really what we're striving for, is to be interactive with everyone. You asked a lot of great questions, and we really appreciate it. Stephen, as usual, I always appreciate your time, your knowledge, your expertise, and your willingness to teach me how to try to understand all this stuff. And just to let everyone know what we were going to do in the video critique we were going to do is we were going to do a half a zigzag drill, left or right. And that's how Stephen was going to evaluate my casting abilities and critique that. So maybe the next time we'll go ahead and save these videos on here. We'll run through these pretty much immediately next time. So how does that sound?
Sounds great. And like I said, I want to see, this is also something that we can go back on. You can work on your communication on your zigzag drills. I know you're insecure about that initial line, and the only way you're going to get better is not just doing it, but doing it with quality reps. Zigzag drill is going to help you there, and doing these type lines that we are going to talk about next week is going to help you as well. But I'm telling you, appreciate everybody's input, appreciate y'all's questions and support, and y'all keep telling your friends, because I promise you, for every one of you that's sitting here listening, there's 15 other people that need to be hearing this. And so spread the word and let's get it out there, guys.
Yep. Thank you so much. This is a Retriever Connection with Stephen Durrance. That's Stephen and Jake Latondras. Till next week. We'll see you then. Thanks again. Catch you later. And Walker, bye. Say bye. Say bye. See you later, guys.